In our everyday speech, we tend to overwhelmingly use basic English and basic prose. We don't usually talk to each other in poetry, right? Right now, I'm not talking to you in poetry. I'm just using basic prose English, which is fine until we want to write some great lyrics, some very poetic lyrics, and we realize, oh, I don't know if I have the vocabulary to come up with some of the vivid, evocative words that I feel like I need or want for my song. So in this video, I'm actually going to break down how to have more vivid words regardless of your vocabulary or lack thereof, because, well, I think it is a good thing for us as lyricists to improve our vocabulary. We really don't need to be reliant on it because there are some beautiful online tools that we can use in order to have some great, vivid words regardless of our vocabulary. So I'm going to screen share for this one and walk you through exactly what to do. So let's dive in.
So one of the things I like really starting off with is getting a whole word pool that I can draw words from when I'm actually working on the lyrics. It's really helpful if you want to sort of have a bunch of words sort of dispersed throughout your song that evoke similar imagery. An example I like to use is if the song is supposed to take place on a beach or the ocean. If you just mention that early on in the song, that's great. Usually that image will somewhat carry through, but you can really hammer it home and make it feel extra real if you're constantly using words like boardwalk instead of, say, sidewalk, which you might not think of unless you go get a pool of words that are all beach-like in origin. So in this example, we're just going to start with one word, and since running up that hill has exploded due to Stranger Things here recently, we'll actually use the word hill here as well, but we're going to use it in a different sense. Let's just say that we want to write a song about this idea that we are climbing up some hill or mountain, but we'll stick with hill for now. And somebody else is satisfied with less, but we're the ones that are like trying to climb up that hill. That will be the basis for the song. So with that in mind, this is what I call a related words document. Literally the idea is that you put words that you really want to hammer home at the top. So let's say hill, and then maybe because I mentioned the word like satisfied, somebody being maybe too satisfied, and then sort of the opposite of satisfied because the main character of this song, the person actually climbing up the hill, is driven. So anyway, I'm just making this up on the spot. Doesn't really matter, but I usually like to fill up this top part to at least like the J or K. So you have several core words you're working with. From there, we'll just pick on hill to keep this video on the shorter side. The simple thing to do is just go to relatedwords.org. It's a fantastic tool for getting words that are related and not necessarily synonyms or anything. They're just related words. So then we type in hill. And then from here, you can see that we get a whole bunch of different words that we could utilize. So we have mountain, we have hillside, ridge, slope, cliff, creek, meadow, highland, heights, peak, ascent, overlooking, sediment, pinnacle. These are all words that are related to hill. They're not synonyms, but they all evoke a similar concept. Like climb would be a great example of if you want to convey that it's more than a hill and it's more like a mountain or a mountainous hill. Maybe you want to use the word climb instead. That really evokes that idea of you're really trying to climb. Now, that probably would apply to a mountain better, but you get the idea. So in this sheet, I would just take words like that. So all these words are from this website here, literally just getting it directly from there. So now we have sort of a pool of words that we can sort of use when in doubt. You know, for example, maybe you want to talk about something with water and you're like, oh yeah, creek is a great way to sort of bring in an image that seems like it would fit in the context of a hill. And, you know, some are going to be a lot less obvious than that. And, you know, sometimes in the scheme of writing, these things aren't as obvious as they seem once they're actually there. But let's say we have sort of a not great line that is meant to communicate the core of what it is we are trying to say for this line. We'll just use this as an example. So it's just saying overlooking your boring meadows. Terrible, terrible, terrible line, in my opinion. Just awful. But sometimes this is where we have to start, right? We have to start with something that sucks, and then we refine it into something that is better. And sometimes it can even be helpful to do something like this, where you are literally very clearly saying exactly what it is you're trying to communicate. It just isn't in a very poetic way. So in this context, this line is sort of meant to mean something like how you're climbing up the hill. So now you're looking down on sort of the meadows that somebody else in your life is currently still on or in. And then you're saying it's boring. That's the perspective that we're going with here. So you'll notice I have 2 words underlined. And the reason they're underlined is because they come pretty directly from our related words document, which again, we just got straight from this relatedwords.org. We have overlook, and then we have meadows. So here we have, singular, meadow, but that's a pretty easy translation. And overlook to the verb form, which would just be overlooking, gets us this first word. So the only word that we didn't get directly from our related words document in this example so far is your and boring, which boring is a pretty pedestrian word that I think is in plain English the way most of us think. Oh, that's boring what it is you're doing over there. Right? That's very just basic, plain prose English. So those are the only 2 words that don't come directly from a related words document. So when one's writing this line, it would make sense to pull some words from the related words document, but also to have some words, obviously, that are not going to come directly from that, because you might not have words like you or I, or boring words like boring that you wouldn't want to eventually keep. So this brings us to the other part of the process to get more vivid words for our songs, because overlooking and meadows are fine enough words, at least to start. They're certainly more vivid than your and boring, which are the words that didn't come from our related words document, but I still think they can be upgraded. So normally this would, of course, have a more full lyric. We wouldn't do it when we only have 1 line for a song, probably, but just for this example, we will keep it at this 1 line. So this is getting into sort of the concept that I call iterative lyric editing. The idea is that at all different sections of your song, you will take the weakest part and then you will try to make it better. That's a really TLDR version, but that's sort of the idea. And at this point, we are doing iterative lyric editing on this line. So the first word we're going to start off with is the word meadows. So what I find most helpful at this part of the process is just going to thesaurus.com and searching for the very word that you're trying to upgrade. See if we can find some synonyms that work better. So in this case, we have grassland, pasture, prairie. I actually do see a word that I like better, and that's the word plain. Now, the reason I like this better is it really hammers home that boring idea, and we're probably going to be getting rid of that terrible word boring in a second anyway. So we'll start with plain. So we'll make it overlooking your boring plains instead. So it's still the case that boring is the absolute worst part of this line. So let's do the same thing, but with boring. So here we have a whole bunch of options. We have dull, humdrum, lifeless, monotonous, mundane, stale, tedious, tiresome. Tons of words that are way, way better than simply boring. Boring definitely sounds too on the nose. So there are some other words in here, though, like lifeless, for example, that sort of adds a new tone to it. It sort of adds some melancholy and tragedy, in my opinion. But another side would be maybe using tiresome. Tiresome, to me, adds a tinge of resentment and irritation, right? If I say that it's somebody's tiresome plains, then it implies that, when I was there, I was tired of it, and it makes clear this was a thing that I wanted to be away from, and you should want to be away from too. It's a thing that is deserving of some form of resentment. And then uninteresting. Uninteresting might be at the heart of what we're trying to go for, right? We started with boring. So let's say we really are sort of going with this uninteresting idea, and we don't really want to imply the melancholy and tragedy of lifeless, or the sort of resentment and irritation towards it in the way it would come across a little bit more with tiresome. But what about uninteresting? Let's actually dive a little bit deeper. We can actually click on this word to then get to things that are synonyms of that word, which sometimes makes it so we get some different results, and we can sort of start to get more precise about what it is we are trying to communicate, because now we're getting some options that have implications that maybe boring didn't have, even though technically this is in the synonym tree of boring, if you will. So what about dreary? Dreary is a word that really stands out to me here. So now we've upgraded all the way from overlooking your boring meadows, which is terrible, to overlooking your dreary plains, which at least to me is significantly better. This certainly still is probably not a line that would make the final cut for me, but this is certainly a great way to upgrade the words of your songs. And just from a word standpoint, which really was the idea of this video, right? How to find vivid words for our songs without a big vocabulary. We started with a small word that we all know and use all the time, boring. And dreary is not necessarily a word that we use a lot. So it's not necessarily a word that will come to mind as we're trying to sort of improvise poetry the way we often sort of are trying to do when we're writing our lyrics, or at least some of the first drafts of our lyrics. So this can be a relatively quick and a relatively painless way to sort of upgrade the words that we're utilizing in our song. Because I don't know about you, but I certainly think that the word dreary is a significant upgrade from boring. And lifeless and tiresome would also be upgrades, but dreary to me is a massive upgrade. You do that to all of your verbs, your adverbs, and your adjectives in your song will have massive improvement. So just to recap, we literally started with just the word hill and then getting related words from relatedwords.org. And then from there, we put the ones that we like the most in this related words document. And then when I made this line, which was just like the first thing I thought of, utilizing two of the words that, again, we got directly from relatedwords.org, basically, that started with hill. Hill's not even in this line. But we started with hill and we got to this. And then we just kept upgrading our words, right? And we only did it twice. So we went from meadows to plains to sort of really try to evoke that idea of how it is boring. But then we pivoted away from the word boring to dreary. And now we have overlooking your dreary plains. But hey, if I were to actually workshop this and create a full song out of this, probably this line would evolve a whole bunch more before it made the final cut. But hopefully you get the idea that we can certainly make our lyrics better and have better words in them simply from utilizing these two tools. And by the way, I did mention the concept of iterative lyric editing. If you want to know more about that and more about the entire lyric writing process that I go through, we sort of just alluded to different parts of it here in this video. Be sure to check out my free guide on my 6-step lyric writing checklist. It takes you through the 6 steps that I go through to really go from an idea to a fully formed lyric that passes the frame test. The whole concept of the frame test is if you take your lyrics and print them out and put them on a frame and put them on a wall, would they still pass as good lyrics? They don't have the crutch of music or a great melody or a cool arrangement to elevate them, which certainly many songs benefit from, because there are so many songs people don't really realize how terrible the lyrics are, but they would realize that if they put them on the wall. If you took WAP and put the lyrics on the wall, people would be like, what is this garbage? And hopefully you have higher goals than what the lyrics, the garbage lyrics of WAP are going for. Hopefully you and I are wanting to achieve something a little bit better than that. So that's the idea of the frame test. If your lyrics are something that you think could pass as poetry, could be on a wall, don't need the melody, don't need the harmony and the instrumentation in order to sound good. They don't need those crutches. It's good poetry on its own. That is how you know that you have a great, solid lyric. So that's the idea of the frame test. If you want your lyrics to pass that frame test, a great way to help you on the way towards that is to check out the free guide. Thank you for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and I'll talk to you in the next one.